Hello, my name is Matthew Smith, and I'm the interim superintendent here in Des Moines Public Schools. With me on this call is Shashank Arora, our Chief Financial Officer. So Shashank and I are going to walk you through the FY24 budget and the process by which the budget is developed, and talk about where we're planning to spend our dollars and how we're investing our money. And we're certainly looking forward to your thoughts and your questions, and we'll continue to utilize that as we bring this to close and we get this approved on April 4th. So we've got a lot of details to share with you, but we also got a lot of strategy to share with you. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Shashank to lead us through the slide deck.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon. Just wanted to share that this is the first time that we actually had 5 in-person meetings across our different high schools so that everyone in the community could actually attend. And I would say we had an excellent attendance. Thanks to everyone who joined us. There were somewhere north of 125 community members, staff who attended the sessions. We received a lot of questions, and we responded to most of the questions as Matt and myself, we were presenting in those sessions. And we have also posted those questions on our DMPS site. So please feel free to visit those questions and see the responses that we have provided. This is the virtual session that we are recording today. Anyone and everyone who's looking into these presentations has time till March of 27th to raise any questions. We will be providing responses to them before the board approves, which is on April 4th. So the agenda for today is school finance overview, where we'll cover the budget basics. How do we get the revenue? What are the key measures of general fund? Where do we spend the money? And what are some of the non-general funds? And then we will go on what are the requirements of the budget, which is a balanced budget, where I'm investing, and the adoption and certifications, and then the final items. This is a diagram I like presenting to ground everyone, to show how complex our school finance is. On the top row, as you would see, it shows what are the different funding sources, or the sources from which the district gets its money or revenue. We have state aid, we have property taxes, sales taxes, federal funds, and some program fees. This diagram also shows how which fund do those revenues go to. So just to pick up property tax levies, it shows it goes into general fund, it goes into special revenue, which is the management fund, it goes into PEPL, it goes into PEARL. So the property taxes funds all these different accounts, and down below shows what are the different purposes or the uses of these funds. So this is just to give you an idea that it's a fairly complicated system where we have to account for each revenue, in which fund it goes, and where we can spend it.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll just add to that, Shashank, is on that particular slide, while it also is meant to lift up, like Iowa school finance is very complex, as this slide would indicate. It also is, if you look at that bottom row down there, uses of funds, it's also very siloed, meaning that these funds can only be spent in certain ways and on certain items. So examples of that are, if you look at some of these capital projects and statewide penny, funds that we utilize for infrastructure, facilities, those funds cannot be spent on personnel or teachers or counselors. And so we utilize this slide a lot because it does provide a broad overview and an accurate overview of the complexity of school finance and the siloed nature of the funding streams. And we are bound by law to stay within those guidelines. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Matt. So this is where it shows what are the different funds. So in broad categories, we have the governmental funds, the proprietary funds, and fiduciary funds. And the governmental funds, they have 4 different funds below that. The operating fund, which we also call the general fund, is the single largest fund. And under special revenue, we have management, PEPL, PEARL, student activity, and the governmental trust. And then under capital, we have save, and debt is debt service. The sources of these funding for these different funds, management, PEPL, Pearl, is coming basically from property. General, we are getting it from different sources. Save is the 1 cent that we pay for everything that we purchase from the 7 cents. And the debt service that we have is basically the revenue bonds that we are generating, that we are raising. Proprietary funds is pretty much like corporate America P&L. So the enterprise funds, which we have food, nutrition, and child care, which are the 2 largest funds, they have to generate enough revenue to pay for the expenses needed to run those funds. And we cannot intertransfer cash from one fund to another, whether it is from one proprietary fund to another proprietary fund, or from one proprietary fund to, say, general fund. And then we have internal service funds, which are the self-insurance, which pays for the health insurance of all the staff, the risk management through which we insure our property and casualty, through which we had recently purchased a cybersecurity insurance, which paid for that incident. So all those different comes from the risk management. And then we have the print shop. Then we have the fiduciary funds, which consist of the pension, the custodial, and others. So the big question is, can district spend money on whatever is needed or wanted? And as Matt was mentioning in that complicated slide, no. The answer is no. We are limited to where we can spend the money based on what the revenue is, and that is dictated by law. In fact, we cannot even transfer money from one fund to the other unless we have a board approval, and that too, it's for a limited time. So it's fairly complex. And one of the questions we get asked is, how come the buildings, investments are being made in buildings and we can't pay teachers? It's because of this nature, that these funds are extremely siloed and we cannot spend the money for unless, only for what it has been dictated by the state. So what are the sources of revenue for us? As I had mentioned, it is state aid, property taxes, sales taxes, federal funds, and program levies. How is our funding determined? So we have regular programs, and it is dictated by the number of students who are enrolled. And based on the number of students enrolled and the per pupil funding which is decided, the state gives a supplemental state aid, which for this year is 3%. So it's a regular math based on the funding per student times the number of students. The categorical funding, even though they are part of general fund, the money that we get for them can only be spent for those categories, like dropout prevention, DOP that you hear of, TAG, which is the gifted and talented. Though they are part of general fund, they can only be used for those categories. And then we have certain programs like SPED and ELL, where we get an additional weight per student. So to give you an idea, say, for example, we get $7,600 a student, and if the weight is 1.2, that'll be 1.2 times $7,600 in case there's a weightage. So how much does each fund have in annual revenues? And as you would say, general fund has got the most amount, which is almost $460 million, 79% of the total funds for the district are sitting in general fund. And then we have the other funds which make up the balance. Why do we talk so much about general fund? It is not only the largest revenue generator for us, but it also has the largest expenses. So 78% of the overall revenue is in general fund, and 76% of the expenses are also related to general fund. And the reason why they don't tie 78 and 78%, because a lot of it is related to the capital projects over here, because we spend and invest on our building and equipment, and there's hardly any payroll or general fund expenses related to that. And again, for the debt service, it is again the same reason. which is being funded through the SAVE. This is a pie chart which basically shows that out of the total funds that we get, 60% of the funding that we get is funded by state, 27% is local, including property taxes, and 13% is by Fed. Historically, the Fed has not been so large, but as some of you know that we received an additional ESSER dollars related to the pandemic, and that is making the federal funds to be 13%, but otherwise it's a lot smaller than what you're seeing this area. So how is the property tax set? A lot of community members feel that if the value of the property goes up, we automatically start getting more money, which is not the case. A lot of levies are decided by a formula. So to give an example, dropout prevention or DOP is calculated based on the number of students times the per pupil funding times a certain percentage, and whatever the dollar amount comes in generates an equivalent property tax rate. PEPL and PEARL are set, which has been approved. PEPL actually has been approved by the community a few years back, and PEARL is also a fixed rate. We do not have debt service levy. This is the GO bonds, which you may have heard. We only have revenue bonds. So the bonds that we have do not impact the property taxes. So what are the key measures that we monitor when it comes to general fund? The most important thing for any one of us to understand is the spending authority or the unspent budget authority. This drives a lot of decisions for any school district in the state of Iowa. If we have a negative unspent budget authority, this is not allowed by the law. And if it happens, the state would warn us, give us a chance to go to them with a plan to fix the negative unspent. And if we are unable to fix it, the state can literally take over the the district. And as some of you may know, it has been done for a few school districts in the state of Iowa. The other ratio is solvency. And solvency ratio is important because this decides how much cash we hold. And if we have enough cash, then it not only helps us in paying our bills without borrowing from the bank, but it also helps us as and when we go for bonding, we get a better rating by S&P and Moody's and others, which lowers our cost of borrowing. So I think I covered some of it in my previous slide, but spending authority, we have to differentiate from cash. It's like your credit card. You have a limit of $20,000 on your credit card. You may have $50,000 in your bank account. What you can spend is $20,000 because that is your limit. And that is what the spending authority is. Even though we may have cash, we cannot really spend money if we do not have spending authority. I think this is something very critical for us to understand. And this limitation applies only for general fund. So how is spending authority calculated? It's a simple math. For the current year, it is the number of students, which as we know are declining for us, so that negatively impacts us. Cost of pupil, which is set largely by the state, that decides the current spending authority. However, in a very simplistic way, what we are looking at is total spending authority, which is the current year spending authority, which I just explained, plus any surplus that we have carry forward from the previous year. That helps us calculate the total spending authority. Now, the number of students is lagging a year behind. So what we are setting in October 2022, the student count that we report to the state, sets the budget for 2024. How can we increase our spending authority? There are three basic ways. One is increase in supplemental state aid, which we have little or no influence on, that is set by the legislators. Increase in student enrollment, which unfortunately is declining. And a little bit of miscellaneous income. And just to give you a flavor of what miscellaneous income is, all the ESSER dollars that we got go into miscellaneous income. Any federal sources of money that we get goes over there, like title money. Also, any interest income that we get goes into miscellaneous income. So supplemental state aid, which is such a key factor which drives how much funding we get per student. If you see historically from 73 to 1994, the rate used to be 6.22%. That rate became half in the period of 95 to 2014 to 2.93%. And for the last 10 years, the average has been hovering around 2%. In fact, this year of 3% is one of the highest in the last 6 to 8 years. As I had mentioned earlier, our enrollment is declining. And just to give you an idea, in the last 5 years, we have lost close to 2,300 students. Now that equates to a large high school, or 3 middle schools, or 6 elementary schools. So this definitely impacts our budget. And if you hear that we are reducing expenses, this is one of the biggest drivers, which is forcing us to reduce expenses, because if we don't do that, it could negatively impact our spending authority. And then we could be challenged by the state to come up with a plan to bring it back. Did we get a lot of money, federal money? Yes, we did. And it really helped the district in doing certain things. So when the pandemic started, we used the money to provide vaccination for the staff. We provided for the HVAC equipment to improve the quality of air in our buildings so that the transmission is reduced. We hired quite a few nurses. We paid various incentives to have employees come back to the buildings, to hire staff. So yes, we received a lot of money, and it really helped the district significantly. But that money is coming to an end by June of 2024. So we will start getting back to the real world. That also raises a challenge that since we have hired a few staff members using ESSER money, and if that money goes, we'll have to find a new home for that. So where do we spend the money that we get? The pie chart on the left shows all funds, and the pie chart on the right shows general fund. So if you look at the all funds, our compensation percentage is 72%, and on general fund it is 82%. And someone may question why. And the reason is, if you look at the other items in all funds, whether it is purchase services, property, debt services, a lot of them do not have a compensation cost involved in them. And that is why that percentage is lower than when you look in general fund, which pays the payroll bill for everyone except for a handful of people who fall part of other funds. So what are the impacts of the economy and legislation? What are the unknowns? We know the inflation has been at historical highs, even though it's coming down a little bit, but still it's much higher than what most of us are used to. It was hovering plus 8%. Today it is hovering at plus 6%. And we know how the Fed has been taking action on increasing interest rates and other things to manage the inflation rate. We have a declining enrollment, which I had mentioned a little bit earlier in our slides. Continued employee shortage. Nationally, not just school districts, but every employer has been having a challenge to hire employee. Because of which we came up with various incentives, both hiring incentives, referral incentives, as well as retention incentives to have our employees over here. There's a potential recession there. If you read the press, some people are saying it could be a soft landing. Some person are saying hard landing. We don't know what exactly it would be. And recession can have a negative impact because if there's a recession, people buy less. If people buy less, then there are less sales tax dollars. If there are less sales tax dollars, then you have less money for save. Also, if the state has less money because people are not buying so much, it could negatively impact our school funding. The long-term state aid, supplemental state aid, we don't know what's going to happen on a long-term basis. This year was 3%, but is 3% sustainable when the inflation is hovering at 6%? State vouchers, as we know, they have recently been introduced and there's been a lot of debate. It would be implemented in 24-25 and not the next fiscal year, but it's very difficult for us at this point in time to really know what the actual impact of that would be. We do know how many school districts are in our district area, but we don't know what the capacity of those school districts are and how many students would apply. I mean, how many parents would apply for the students to join the non-public schools. The state has offered to all parents an ESA, which is equivalent to what this per pupil cost is. And if a parent opens an ESA, the district would get approximately $1,200, which are categorical funding. And even though categorical funding, as I had mentioned earlier, is part of general fund, but they're categorical fundings and they can be spent only for those items. We would presume that most parents would open an ESA, but in case a parent does not open an ESA, then we would not get this $1,200. And then there are some potential increased costs. One is DMTRS, which is our Des Moines Teachers Pension Plan. We know largely what the cost of that would be, but we are also finalizing the DBM, which is the district band decisions for the district, which is for non-bargain staff. We have been losing some staff to the neighboring districts, so we are trying to evaluate and make our pay more competitive with the neighboring districts. So this is a high-level view of what is happening to the general fund and why do we keep talking about that we need to have reductions. As I had mentioned earlier, that we cannot go into spending authority, and the board a few years back had decided that we would like to maintain and have a 15% spending authority, which equates to approximately 2 months of paying our bills. Now, when we were having discussions in July, our assumptions were a lot different and they kept evolving, and the different columns shows how the different major assumptions kept evolving. So staff, we were thinking we'll have a 3% increase. We have landed up at 3.8%. So that increases almost 14.1 versus $11 million. Goods and services, we're trying to maintain it kind of flat at 1%. We didn't know we were estimating a 500 student loss. Fortunately, we had only 250 student loss. It looks good compared to 500 student loss, but we definitely want to arrest this decline there. But that negatively impacts us by another $1.8 million. So the cumulative impact of all these trends, whether it's staff cost, goods and services, or lower enrollment, is close to $17 million. We got $3 million as a state supplemental aid, which is around $6.7 million. So the delta for us was $10.2 million just to remain flat. The $2 million is what I was mentioning about the unknowns in the previous slide, which is the DBM and the DMTRS. So this slide shows that we started with a path of reducing $12.2 million, which shows on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side shows how we managed to achieve that $12.2 million. And I'll talk more about each of these reductions in the next few slides. Health benefit reduction. We know how much our staff values the health benefits. So we started having discussions as to what is it that we can do to reduce the cost of health benefits without negatively impacting the covered member or the family of the covered member. So we started having discussions and we came up with a plan where we are working with a health provider, which is Wellmark, who with the pharmacy and then with the pharmaceutical will, for certain specialty drugs, work to get us rebates So the covered member would still have the same coverage and same medication, but because of these rebates, we would be in a position to save almost $750,000. It helps the employee also because they have a copay, and now that copay would be covered as part of this overall new strategy that we're implementing. And without negatively impacting the benefit, we are saving $750,000, which equates to almost 7 to 8 staff positions. So without reducing the staff, we are in a position to reduce almost $750,000. On the operational side, we are targeting $1 million reduction based on different things. One is we're moving some expenses from general fund to non-general fund, which is a strategy which the district has adopted in the previous years. We'll continue to do that. There's another program called the Break Fix program, which is basically our repair expenses for electrical and electronic items. They have historically been paid from general fund. We have purchased an insurance coverage, and now instead of using a general funds, we can use the management funds. So this again provides a relief to the general funds, which is really tight. And then consolidations of some underutilized facilities.
And I want to note in terms of the consolidation of underutilized facilities, that's a broad statement because it includes everything, right? It includes everything from district sites to potential school sites in terms of consolidations. So and there's some points that we'll discuss a little bit further on about this too, and some slides coming up, which is we're engaged in with a demographer and looking at a demographic study around the birth rates in Des Moines Public Schools and looking at enrollment rates, all kinds of data points to help us know how we can best optimize the efficiency of all of our physical plant sites. And so again, when we talk about the potential of consolidations of underutilized facilities, everything is on the table at that point in time because we need to consider all of it, knowing that while we're planning and building a balanced budget for FY24, there are implications for FY25, FY26, and beyond. And so what I will tell you is that as we're discussing consolidations and what that might look like and what the potential there is, there will be no consolidations for FY24. These are conversations that we're having right now to build additional community conversations and additional staff conversations that we'll have throughout next school year as we're planning for FY25, 26, and 27.
Thanks, Matt, for the clarification. Staffing reduction. So as we were talking about staffing reductions, the strategy that we adopted was we need to focus on what the board goals are. And we also wanted to keep the reductions furthest from the classroom. So if you see that, on the right-hand side, we are showing the overall impact of reduction is $9.5 million, but the teaching staff, the reduction is the lowest compared to other categories, which is 2%, and that reduction also is being driven because of the declining enrollment. And I had shared in the few slides earlier where we have lost so many students over a period of time. We are recognizing that the classroom coverage is important, and that is again one of the strategies that we adopted as we were making decisions with teaching staff. And if you see in the support staff and central office staff, this is where the reduction is the highest, which is 5%. So where is the district spending its resources? So we had come to the community with our SMART goals, and these are the 7 levers that we have, which have been subdivided into universal tier and foundational tiers. And
yeah.
Matt,
So
do you want to talk? Yeah. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's important to know about this particular diagram and this visual is that these levers represent a year's worth of collaborative work with community partners, parents, staff members around developing what we're calling levers, but are outputs of what we desire, what do we value, and what do we want to have investments in all of our schools, right? So that all of our students and all of our staff and our families are experiencing high quality, equitable, rich and loving and rewarding experiences in whether they're students, whether they're staff, or whether they're family members in all of our buildings, in all of our spaces. And so that's what this particular chart is meant to represent. Is it is about the community voice and the many months and actually, quite frankly, years worth of work to bring it into a consolidated framework like this universal and foundational tier diagram, because it's about building this together, and it's about bringing the voices to the table and making sure that we are moving forward with every voice and every unique individual on the front of our mind about how they're going to experience our spaces and what we need to do to invest dollars in those outputs and those outcomes.
So what are the investments that we're doing in these different levers? So if you see over here, the outer circle of this donut shows what is the amount that we are spending in FY24, and the inner circle of the donut shows the amount that we are spending in this fiscal year of FY23. And as one would imagine, the largest chunk of 37%, or $174 million next year, is going into high quality curriculum. And I'm not going to read each one of those, but it basically shows the percentage for each of those different levers, how much we are spending on it. And these are all general fund dollars. This donut chart basically shows where are we spending those money again in terms of expenses. So salaries and benefits equate to 82% of the money. These two are the two largest shares, 57% on salaries and 27% on benefits. And then we have the others, which comprise the 18%. This chart shows what we're investing in FY23. So the set of 4 columns on the left shows FY23 inputs, and the 4 columns on the right show FY24. This shows that we are investing in FY23 close to $4.5 million, whether it is related to curriculum materials, professional learning, staffing changes, extended learning opportunities in goal 1, 2, and 3. And that amount is doubling up for FY24. This slide shows the same for Guardrail 2 and Guardrail 4, what we are spending on foundational tier. And again, very similar format, and which is SEL, engagement, health and well-being, school safety, and cybersecurity, which is something where we have made a definitive step to start investing more based on the incident that happened there. And if you see again over here from 23 to 24, we are increasing our investments from close to $9 million to almost close to $20 million. So significant increase in investments in each of these different columns. And again, we are trying to show how much we are spending in each of those different things under material, professional learning, programs and staff, and partners and service providers. This chart over here, this slide shows how much we're investing in activities and athletics, as well as on recruitment and retention. And as we know that these are the two clear things that the district needs to invest on, and the dollars speak for themselves. So under athletics and activities, these two things, as you would see, we're spending almost $31 million in 23, which is approximately the same amount in 24. But on recruitment and retention of staff, we are increasing significantly. And a combination of the two of them leads us from almost $113 million, and it's $101 million. The big delta between 23 and 24, why you see it reduce, is the more of an investment which is happening in capital projects, which is related to the most expense related to the stadium that we are working with Drake, would be happening in 23. And since we don't have a comparable investment in 24, that is why you see a little bit of a drop in total investments. But other than that, there is an overall increase in the investments that we are doing in almost every other category. So what is the board adopting and certifying here? One of the most critical things is budget must be balanced, i.e. revenues plus fund balance should be greater than annual expenditures. And as I had mentioned, if that is not the case, we can be challenged by the state and they could come over and start running the district. And the second is we need to set the property tax rate. So what is it that we are proposing for adoption? So if you see the total revenues for the district, which will be generated in FY24, which we are coming to the board for approval, to the community for approval, is $602,915. And the beginning balance is $282 million. So total resources is $884. Something I would clarify, this is all funds. This is not just general funds. Out of that, the total expenditures and uses is $609 million. So our ending fund balance is $275. We start with $281 million. We are reducing to $275. So we are trying to maintain it as flat as possible. We always continuously keep looking at what is it that we need to do to keep it flat. The property tax rate, which is the set of columns on the right-hand side, for FY23 or the current year was 15.34, and this is reducing to 15.15. And the big decrease that it's driving is through the general fund is because the budget guarantee which we had in place for FY23 is no longer in place in FY24 because the drop in students is lower than what it was in the previous year. There is a statute in the Iowa code which says that if the total amount of general fund dollars that a district receives when compared to the previous year is lower in the current proposed budget year, the state gives 1% increase. And that 1% increase is going away because the drop is less. And the SSA, which is also, like I had mentioned, 3% versus compared to 2.5% in the previous years, makes us not get the budget guarantee. So the tax rate's more or less flat, a little bit of a reduction for the benefit of the community. So what are the key things to remember? The district cannot use the funds on anything it chooses. I think this is very critical for all of us to understand. If we have money sitting in one fund, say SAVE, which is used for your all capital projects, we cannot use it to pay teachers' salary. Most revenues are outside the control of the district. We can influence some, but not much. Compensation is the single largest expense in the general fund, and as I indicated, it is 82%. It is also the largest expenditure in all funds, which is 72%. And it is spending authority and enrollment which drives the budget. That is the end of our presentation. Here we have mentioned an email address. We would really appreciate if the community comes back to us with any questions. Just like last year, we will try to address all the questions before the board approves the budget. This year, the date for approval is April 4th. We have provided time till 27th of March for everyone to come to us with the questions, and we'll have the responses provided on our DMPS site before the board approves the budget. Any final thoughts, Matt?
No, just want to thank you again, Shashank, for you and the team for continuing to pull together some really amazing presentation with a lot of data and a lot of information. And so just want to thank everybody for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you. And it is an absolute pleasure to serve your children, to serve the staff of Des Moines Public Schools, who truly is the best that you'll ever find. And it's a pleasure to serve this community. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for continuing to choose Des Moines Public Schools. Again, if you come here, you will become here. And it is our commitment for that. And we love you, we care about you, and we appreciate all that you do. Thanks so much.
Thank you.